Okay, let's start the last bit, and then we see how long it takes, and then we stop. I have one more bit about before we get to the communication. And I think this is interesting. I don't know how many of you have done this. This is usually done in evaluations where we want also the client to participate a bit, and not because, well, as you know, there are different ways of doing evaluations. I'm a big proponent of this kind of user-focused evaluation or developmental evaluation, because I don't see the point in just going and judging the client, even though sometimes it would be fun. But it's not. That doesn't give me money in the long term. So it's better to be constructive. So I approach evaluation in a sense that the evaluation is done for learning and improving the policy. And if the recommendations are not used, then the evaluation was actually a failure. So if it just goes on the shelf and nothing happens, then there was no point in doing that. So in order to make the evaluation relevant and make the client also interested in the recommendations, and to make sure that the recommendations are factually correct, even if the client doesn't like them, and also to get the stakeholders on board, we quite often do this like validation workshop before the evaluation is ready. So when we have the draft report, or when we have collected all the data and done the analysis before writing the final report, we would do summary of the findings and conclusions, not necessarily have any recommendations at all yet. We can have some, but not necessarily. So we would show them what we have found and the summary of our findings. And the validation workshop, this is like typically a few weeks before the draft of the final report would be handed in. So we would have either an online or in-person workshop where we would present our findings and then get the client and the different stakeholders to discuss them, to see whether we have understood the things correctly, whether we have focused on the right things, or is there something missing, that we are able to then make good recommendations that will actually solve the issue that we have found, and to give such recommendations that will actually be used. Then we have, typically we have maybe about 10, 15 participants, can be less depending on the program. It's usually at least the evaluation steering group and then other stakeholders. And yeah, if it's an online workshop, it's usually 1.5 hours. If it's in person, it can be longer. This is a typical schedule. It's actually very simple. So, welcome introduction. Then we present the evaluation findings about half an hour or so. Then we can have a plenary discussion about the first reactions to the findings. And they vary from, well, this sounds credible, this sounds like you have covered everything, or then otherwise it sounds reasonable, but this part of it doesn't make sense, or that why are you focusing on this so much that this is a minor thing. But yeah, so then there was a plenary discussion. Okay, this is just one way of doing it. And then I have divided that, we would have thematic discussions in small groups. Let's say like there would be one group discussing the findings on the business support and another one on the environmental section, depending on the program. And actually, we have here, first is like the validation of the findings, and then the second one is going towards developing recommendations. Of course, some of the recommendations that come out of the workshop are such that you could take them on board, some of them no. But that's then your judgment, that this is like material for you to work with. But you have to frame it in the sense that that we can, that we can use some of the some of the ideas for the recommendations. You can also test some of the recommendations in the discussions, because sometimes we know that for political reasons it's hard to give a certain kind of recommendation, and then you can test, from the steering group, or from the small group discussions that would this kind of a solution be okay? And then, you get the reactions like, yes, it would be okay, or like, no, we will never do this. So you can test the waters a bit here as well. But of course, any recommendations, as I said before, they must be based on the findings and conclusions. But in the small groups, you can have backing up for the initial ideas of the recommendations you've already thought of, or you can get some new ideas. You can also get like completely irrelevant stuff. It can't promise, but sometimes, but we find this quite useful. This is good both for the communication as well as for the people to understand and discuss the findings. But yeah, so this is actually still part of the evaluation. There is another way of doing this, that you don't actually validate the results, but you just present them after you have finalized your report. But then you have to have some kind of a way of checking that what you are recommending will make sense. That then you have to discuss with the client or otherwise be sure. But so we quite often do this, and this is one of the ways of engaging the client and the stakeholder in the evaluation process, and kind of before the evaluation is ready, to make sure that they will actually use some of the findings, because it could be their own idea that gets actually written in the report, and then they like to implement it. But as I said, the recommendations, they must be such that you are able to stand behind them. And even if it was like the head of unit who said something, you don't have to take it up. Okay, and now for the final thing of today, the evaluation communication. I already said about the evaluation results, that if the results are not used, then it didn't really make sense that you did the work. Communication is exactly the same, especially in today's world, that if you don't tell anybody about what you have done, nobody will know about it, and it will be totally buried. Of course, sometimes the clients want it to be buried. I have had those as well, but typically no, since they actually spent a lot of money on this. And the communication is important because you summarize the information and you clarify the message and the most important findings. Sometimes the evaluations can, for example, encourage discussion about the topic. We had one that we did in Finland about the closure of village schools, and it actually got into national media because it's a really interesting topic. There's an evaluation done by the Finnish Education Evaluation Institute, and the evaluation was basically about the impact of village school closures on children's rights. So that hit the news as well. Very interesting discussions afterwards in print media and TV, and the project manager had to go on morning TV to talk about this. I mean, it's quite interesting. Of course, not every evaluation gets to TV, but still. Also, that if there's communication, if you know that it's going to be public, you will want to make it good because your name is written there. So not don't publish it so that you get some stress about publishing good stuff. But also, as a private consultant, the communication is important because it's basically it's marketing. That if I can show that actually my old client is paying for me to present my work so that I can get more work. So I see it as marketing simply. So if somebody asks me to go and present an evaluation study that I have done, I will not say that my hours are full and I don't have time for this, but I'll say, okay, let's make this work. I will come. And I mean, I don't have to mark my hours since I'm free to do overtime anytime. So this is my company. But yeah, it's very important also for marketing. So then concerning communication, the evaluator has to typically draft a communication plan for the evaluation. We very often do it for but not for very small programs, but we do a communication plan for the evaluations if it's a reasonable sized evaluation. And then we also, the evaluator does all of the reporting, possibly also doing infographics or things like that, different types of communication things for the evaluation. And then the evaluator also communicates the results, and based on the communications plan. Very often the clients support us in the work. So especially if it's like a ministry or something like that, they would have a communication department who is involved in, for example, in the steering group, and they help us that when we have something to communicate, they distribute it through their channels, and they help us, for example, proofread the documents or something like that. They have media relations, so you don't have to do everything. The client is also responsible for using the evaluation results. And this is the sad part of being a consultant, because you do all this work and you know better what they should do, but you can't implement the changes. And you just have to live with it. But okay, might be that they order another evaluation study and you tell them that you should have done what I told you in the first place. But but yeah, you can't implement the things. You can only point to the things that should be changed. And yeah, then the client is also responsible for following up of the implementation of the recommendations. Nowadays, communication requirements are much higher than they were when I started 15 years ago. Back then, it was totally normal to write a report, print it on paper, get it bound, to make it like a book, and hand it over to different kinds of people and have it, and then they would put them on their bookshelves. And we would have maybe a seminar about it, and everybody gets coffee and cake, and then that's it. But nowadays, not anymore. Basically, the evaluation report, once you have done it, it's material for communication. That is not the end, even though you hope it would be. And also that one thing that is important to know, or like to note, is that communication should not happen only at the end, but you should communicate in different parts of the project. So that you would have to design the communication to support the process and not only disseminate findings. We need communication, for example, for supporting data collection, for getting people interested in coming to workshops or to discuss the topic somehow. And then also maybe distribute interim findings, and then to get them to also familiarize themselves with the final report. Of course, having said this, apparently most people will never read the report. That's actually true. So you have to digest it somehow. So making shorter summaries or making visualizations or something that you get your message through. But let's say out of this room, if you were the steering group, even out of you guys, 3 would read the report. And most would look at the findings and conclusions. And maybe 1 would look at the summary, and a couple of them of you guys would say, okay, maybe I'll look at it when I have time.
And that's another purpose for validation meeting, to make the people get more in-depth information. Without it, they wouldn't have.
Yes, absolutely. That you actually need to tell the people what you have found, and that's important. This is a good thing, this O'Neill integrating communication in evaluation. This is not very long, but it's pretty good, because it's basically using the evaluation, or like using communication to strengthen the evaluation. It has good ideas and tips for this, and of course. The last point is that not all the organizations are able or willing to communicate in the same way or at the same magnitude. I have worked with different Finnish ministries, and they have very different ways of working with evaluators or actually wanting to communicate about their own evaluations. There's one ministry who, when we did an evaluation for them, they didn't even tell us that the evaluation had been published at the government publication series. I found it out when I was looking through the publications. It was like, oh, there's our evaluation. Then there are others who, they spam all kinds of social media channels. They have a blog post and they organize a seminar. They want you to go and talk about it. Sometimes, even go and give a briefing to the minister about it or something like that. And then there are others who do something in the middle. So it really depends also on how much time they have, how much aware they are of evaluation, and their own capacity as well.
Sometimes it would work on us. We have to develop evaluations in which we have to come up with a communication strategy.
Yes.
I'm clueless about communication strategies. So we just have to put it on our website and do some communication on social media.
Yes. And it also depends on you, what you want to do. This is the communication plan. It's very simple, a standard format for a communication plan. And this is how you would do communication plan for an evaluation, that you would assess, when you communicate what to whom during different parts of the process. The important thing that I would say really is that because you can communicate until the cows come home, so you can spend all of your evaluation budget on communication. So you need to make a choice of how much effort and time you're going to use for the communication. What are you going to do with it? So you need to prioritize the target groups because you cannot communicate to everybody. So, for example, if it's important for the policymakers to know about something because there's going to be a new law or new policy or something, then you would have something for them which feeds to their to their information needs, or the stakeholders of different kinds. And then choosing the right channel to each target group, this is important. I'm working with an association in Finland, and they have now revamped their communication strategy, and they've gone very much up to social media. But their external visibility has grown, but their internal visibility has reduced because their members are 65-plus-year-olds. So the communication strategy didn't exactly hit the right target. That yes, they are getting a lot of attention from outside their organization, but their own members are now a bit lost. So
you need printed materials.
Exactly, printed materials, a local newspaper.
Yeah.
That is good, or
magazines.
Yeah.
If you're doing, for example, evaluation of the specific program and client is, from the beginning that it won't be published, does it even make sense to have a communication plan? Because you will be only communicating this to the...
Not really, no. Fortunately though, the European Union, all of the EU-funded things, if they use technical assistance, they must be public. So that creates a demand for the communication strategy. But if it's internal, then it doesn't make sense to make a big communication plan. Then you would write a few lines about who you are going to communicate, rather than making a major plan for that. But if it's for internal use only, then not so important. Because you also have to think about the resource use. How much effort are you going to be using for the communication part if it's only an internal report? Then, you have to make a balance. And actually nowadays, there's not necessarily only communication plan, but it could be like a communication and interaction plan, because you want the communication to activate the people. So here is this sort of idea that you're launching the project, the evaluation project, and you're communicating about the data collection and what are you going to, and activities, and then you're engaging the stakeholders in workshops and communicating about that, and then you communicate about the evaluation findings as well. Sometimes we get, especially with, for example, the local action groups, when we launch the project, they order an evaluation of their strategy or something, then they write a small piece for their newsletter saying that we have started an evaluation, and evaluator XYZ will contact the beneficiaries soon for interviews, and you will also receive a survey, so that they get a warning beforehand that this is going to happen, so that when they get an email from me, through SurveyMonkey, they don't just say like, oh, what is this? This is some kind of, phishing. So, so that they know about it in advance. Also, for example, there we would quite often use the channels of the client to say, for example, especially if they are local people, then that we are going to have some evaluation workshops, and they will be held on Thursday at 5 o'clock here and there. And then the client would help to send the invitations. But yeah, not everything has to be done by the evaluator. Actually, it's good if the client communicates. That's the ideal case. So you work and they communicate. But yeah, so the point is that to help to use the communication in such a way that the people are aware of your project and that they are interested in it, and that they will give the support in the form of participating in the data collection, and then also hearing about the findings. Especially relating to the local level, there is this idea of giving back to the community who provided you with the data, so that if you work especially at the local level or with a specific community, that you would tell them what you have found out, and that helps them to think about issues and to develop further. And I think it's a pretty nice one, because they spend their time giving information to you. So, in a sense, you can go and, tell them what you found. This triangle is basically this is how you push all of the information. First you have the data that you structure, code, analyze, then you report it. So you write the report. Here we are at the final report level. Then you summarize the final report into the executive summary. Then you also make a presentation. You possibly have a webinar where you present the main points. Then you squeeze it further into a press release, which is 2 pages. You might write a blog post or make a podcast or make a video when it goes a bit different directions. But then ultimately you will end up with a social media post of approximately 160 characters that summarizes your 1 year's work. And that's the whole thing, that when I said that the report is material for the communication, that you end up with pushing and pushing and pushing. And that's why it's important to know what your main points are, because you will have to do this work anyway. So once you have sent the tweet or X or whatever, then you can consider that you're done. Not before that, not when you finish the report. The blog posts and the podcasts, they are slightly different, also the videos. I think they're interesting, but they take the findings to a bit different level. I will talk about it soon. Also then the quality of the final report is important. Actually, these are reports I've been involved in, the colorful ones. So if you look at these reports and think about which one of them would I like to read, the one which looks the most boring, the one with the white thing, this was Finnish Regional Development Fund evaluation for the previous programming period, the biggest evaluation out of all of these, most information and everything. But still, when we looked at the number of downloads, that one up there won. Yeah, So actually, people read that more because it looks nicer.
What does it say?
It is the grain, oil, and protein plants cooperation project evaluation. And the other one is organic farming development program evaluation. But yeah, so in these ones we had in-house graphics designer who did the layout, and he actually even took the pictures. These are his pictures. So, but these reports were like 30 pages, but they contained everything that needed to be there. Of course, not every evaluation can be done this way because, I mean, if I remember correctly, he said that it takes 8 hours for 20 pages of editing. So he can do 20 pages in one day. So, yeah, so for this kind of reports, he worked only the editing, layout editing took 1.5 days for 30 pages. And that's out of the evaluation budget. But there the client said that we need it as readable as possible, we need it good looking, and we are happy to pay for it.
I have a question about visuals inside the report. Would you consider adding pictures like related to the process, like what the evaluation was about? I don't know if it's infrastructure or...
Yeah, sometimes we have them. Yes, it depends. If it's a report that I would say that if the report has like if it's edited in a way that it is nicely readable, then yes. But then if you just have like just a Word document, it looks a bit odd if you have pictures here and there. Yeah, so we usually either at least in my experience, we've usually gone like either full on or nothing. So it's either really nicely done or they're not at all. So depends a bit. But also sometimes you have to use the client's format. Like every EU report has to be in the EU format. And now also every government report in Finland has to be in the government layout format, which is completely unforgiving, no pictures, and because they state no pictures, so then no, with the colors of the client and everything. So it depends a bit on what the client wants. But yeah, sometimes if you get free hands, then you can do like really cool stuff. But even like this, I think even if you don't do any tricks, it should be easy to read and well structured, suitable length, and have some graphs and tables that kind of break the text a bit. I think the worst one I have ever seen was the evaluation of the Hungarian Rural Development Program from last programming period. 1,400 pages. Whew, I think I have no idea how somebody actually had the energy to write that, but that was quite something. It was like, yeah, my computer almost crashed when I tried to download it. But yeah, it was horrible, horrible. But yeah, it was very, very detailed, very long. But yeah, so in that case, there's no way anybody has ever read that. I don't think so. So yeah, I mean, typically, and some clients also have page limits. They state that we don't want anything more than 100 pages, or 30, or 50, or it's a bit wild. It depends. Yeah. Okay, then communication channels. Well, this is easy. I just want to say here that you have to, the communication is not only that you tweet, but you also have to, for example, communicate with the team. And there's internal communication. That's a lot of the communication that you have. how are you exchanging information within the team? In my former company, we used to have we used to Slack, so we had a new channel for every new project. So all of the project communication would be on that channel and not elsewhere. There are also some other projects like this. Some people use Teams nowadays. Yeah, WhatsApp, this is an interesting one. We use WhatsApp sometimes for like if you're facilitating something, so that amongst, for example, a conference that you have for the conference organizers, you have a WhatsApp group. And then there are these messages, it's like, we have run out of paper. And, you know, so kind of, yeah. Yeah, and then, okay, this one. This is old, 2014. But some of the channels, I think, you might not even know. I mean, have you ever heard of Periscope or SlideShare? Most probably not. But anyway, so the point of this, and I think this is important, is that even if you are doing communication for the evaluation, you don't have to do everything. You are, of course, you work on the media that you own. So, for example, on your own website, you write about the evaluation, or like in your internal communication or newsletters. Those are the ones which are owned by you or your company. For evaluation, we don't do paid media. That's not ethical, I think. We don't have like brand ambassadors for evaluations. That would be funny. But we do use shared media, so social media, and we don't do partnerships. But yes, no influencer engagement. I would love to have an influencer. You know, it's like, you know, today we're going to talk about evaluation. You can have a tour of this evaluation company. Yeah, oh, I would love that. But yeah, no, we don't do that really. But some of this, so not everything is strictly relevant to us. But yeah, so it can be that, for example, in your own media, you do, for example, a blog post. Then you share it to social media, where somebody else forwards it and starts a discussion, and it goes on like this. Then you can also have, you can also get earned media relations. So, for example, you can, you can get your evaluation into the newspaper, not only because it was bad, but actually if it was good, that would be excellent. Or that it actually raises so much discussion that that people want to talk about it. So then you earn your place in media. So I think, yeah, so I think here the important thing is to think about the strategy. How are you going to do it? Because there's so much communication you can do, but communication is not something that you can usually like build to the project. Now, some of it yes, but not everything. And also, as researchers, it's always extra work. Some people like doing this. Some people find it like very, very unpleasant. So, because you know, I have some former colleagues who would just like to do analysis and do the research, and then tell the communications person to read the report and do the stuff. That like I don't have time for this. I'm doing work. And then there are some others who are happy to do the communications part as well.
I have a question about blogs. I don't have any experience with it. And in the blog, would you include the methodology or just findings?
Yes. Okay, I will get to this soon. Yes. No, okay. In a blog, I would not necessarily include any of it. So yeah. Okay. So yeah, I have a thing about the blog soon. So about how to present the evaluation findings, you can do summary sheets. I know for example, citizen summary, that's like a bit longer. The summary sheet is a bit like an infographics, so one pager that looks nice. And then citizen summary is like 2 to 4 pages. It's a bit like the executive summary, but it looks prettier, and it's something that can be put on the website and people can see that these were the main points. Web pages, blogs, video, podcast. I've even seen a cartoon of an evaluation. As a Latvia-Lithuania program, Interreg. Webinar is typical. We already talked about the conferences and journals, that if you present evaluation findings there, you have to have an agreement from the client in advance, and you have to include it in the data collection. That you can't just like wildly go and present your evaluation findings because it was work done for some client who paid for it. And at least we have quite often the kind of statement saying that the intellectual property of the final product is that goes to the client, so we can't even use it. Okay, so we have press release. Has any one of you written press releases? You have, yes.
Usually after having, for example, the key event on the project, where we presented the results, and I wrote the press release, and I was trying to communicate it with the media and have it published by the local newspapers or their news portals.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, we do this quite often. Very often, as consultants, we say that we write the press release so that the client can use, because we know the contents better. So it's the aim of the press release is to catch the attention of the media simply. It has some kind of a catchy way of doing this. It has a very standard format. It's quite easy to learn how to do it. And it answers who, what, where, when, why, and how. It's pretty simple, actually. So the format is like this. So it has a catchy but relevant title. So what would I say? Money not well spent, the story of the regional development funding, or something like this. And then we would summarize the main findings, and then we give the factual information. So like the evaluation conducted by the company X finds that the regional development funding has mainly been used to fund the lifestyle of the program manager, or something like that. And then there's a catchy quote from somebody like, I cannot believe that they did this with the public funding, and blah, blah, blah. And then you can have like facts or figures saying, for example, that there's 75 million euros, the aim is to do this and that. And then you say, where you get more information. Okay, this was now a totally ridiculous press release, but you know what I mean. So that you try to find the main idea, and you try to get the press interested. Of course, you shouldn't fabricate stuff, but it should be like real.
We're also sending our policy briefs to the media. We have a recent project on tobacco taxation, so the topic is not very interesting to the public. But we managed to catch the attention by writing a title which was something like Serbians save on money to buy cigarettes, which was very catchy, and then we got significant media attention from the top newspapers and their news portals, and also some TV stations. So I guess you can make some topic which is not very interesting, such as public policy evaluation or informed decision making, even a bit more interesting by making it catchy.
Yes, yes, absolutely. We have also used the press releases in my former company. If we had like very big evaluations or very big research, then we would use the press release and make a kind of like a media pack and even organize actually a press event when the thing got publicized. But this is for like very big things. And the media would love it because then we would invite them and they would get the materials a couple of days before, and there would be the media event, for example, 1 or 2 days before the launch or the publication of the report, and that day they would have the stories. So it depends on how interesting the topic is and what the client thinks about it, but you can go quite big on this media relations and the communication. And I think it is useful because then it's, at least for me as a researcher, even if I'm not necessarily publicizing all of this, it makes sense that my work is used for something. That I might not be the spokesperson who goes on the morning TV, but I know that my work was useful. So it's I think this is important for the kind of sanity of the evaluator and the happiness in your work. Yeah, and this is just another way of showing how to do the press release. This is a good source, the Pro Copywriters. It opens us a link from there. But yeah, we very often use a press release as a standard item on the communication because it doesn't actually take so much longer after you have already written the report and done the executive summary. This is 2 pages at max. So this is 1.5 hours at maximum of work. But it can bring a lot more attention to your work. Websites, I know some companies have, or like some organizations have websites for specific evaluations, but I don't think it's always necessary. If it's a long evaluation, let's say like you're doing a 3-year evaluation or something and you produce interim reports and you have things that are updated regularly, then it might make sense. But for a single evaluation, no. Too much work. And also with the websites, you need to update them regularly so that people might come to your website once, but if it's not updated, then there's no point. It's a lot of work for you. But you need to have a plan of what you're going to do. But yeah, for a longer evaluation or a longer research project, why not? Same thing about the podcast, actually. The best thing is to have a regular podcast series, the same like in blog posts or websites, that you have a plan of what you're going to do. If you don't have a platform for yourself, you can try to be a guest in somebody else's podcast and get your findings discussed and somebody else to publicize it. But it's a nice way to communicate the evaluation findings. It's relatively easy. I've done this in the sort of gonzo journalism way. I have Audacity on my laptop. It's a free program. I have a microphone, and in the Helsinki area, you can rent with your library card. You can rent like a studio room, which is like silent. It's air. It doesn't echo. Yeah. So we get a couple of people who know about the topic. We discuss it, We have some kind of a script of what we are going to say, but of course we always go all over the place. And then somebody gets to edit the sound and cut the things. Usually from like a 60-minute discussion, you end up scrapping half of it because there are a lot of pauses, and then you remove, for example, this filler. Some people have filler words such as like or something like this, or kinda, or whatever it is in your language. Once when I did a podcast with this one professor, I removed 47 of his fillers from 1 hour discussion. He said, että tuota niin, which means something like, well, yeah, kind of. And that was his filler. And towards the end, I started knowing it because when you're editing the sound track, you see how it looks like, and you're, oh, it's coming again. so you know how to cut it off from there. Hardest part about it is to listen to your own voice, and you listen to the voice track at least 5 times. So you listen to yourself for about 5 hours. And they're like, oh my, how could I be so stupid? Like I sound so annoying. so yeah, but this is a fun way of doing it. But what usually happens in this is that we take some finding. So for example, let's say local development evaluation. And we take a finding relating to, for example, the employment or like employment opportunities for young people. And we discuss that. And then we don't discuss the whole report, and we don't like read the report. We don't say that conclusion 1 is this, conclusion 2. It's more like, well, in the recent evaluation report, it was found that the cohesion policy does not actually support the employment of young people. And then the discussion starts from there. So it takes one specific angle, and then it kind of goes to different places. So it in a way, for the podcast, the evaluation is the starting point, and then it might go to different places. But yeah, you usually have a script, you have usually questions that you discuss, but then, as you know with discussions, they end up going to different kinds of places. But this is a good option, and I know that a lot of people like to listen to things nowadays. So if your company is thinking about new ways of communicating findings, I would say, give a try to podcast. It's not too bad. There are also professional podcast studios in quite many places who would do the editing for you. We used to have this Prime Minister's Office research grant, and the Prime Minister's Office actually organized all of the podcasts of all of the research projects, and they had a podcast series. It was really cool because you could just walk into the studio with the list of questions, and they organized everybody to be there, and they paid for the sound editor to do all of the work. And all you had to do was to drink coffee and talk about your work. I mean, I thought that was kind of fun. So yeah, there are some good resources for starting a podcast. It is pretty easy actually, and it's interesting. But yeah, this is also one of the things that be aware what you promise in terms of communication, because the client will remember it. And then you're about to send the final invoice, and they're like, you promised a podcast. Why did I do this? But sometimes, you do this to, blog posts. Now I come here. Similar to the podcast, it's an easy way, an interesting way to communicate the findings. But also there you should take the findings and the report as a starting point and take another angle to it. So, so rather than summarizing the entire report, you could focus on one of the details. You can have, no, because actually, for summarizing the report, use either executive summary or infographics or something. But then a blog post is supposed to be something that people are interested in. They are not interested in how you did your research or something like that necessarily. They're interested in what you found and what it means, or how it is related to other things. So it could be that you take some of the things from the report and then you take it from another angle. For example, about the local development evaluation we did, we wrote a blog post, but about the aspect of networking and how important that is. So it wasn't like the whole report, but it was, that network is, what networking means and how it shows and things like that. So yeah.
So is it possible even to produce 2 blogs more?
Yeah. Actually, you can. One evaluation report can be blogged in like very many ways if you look at the different things. And also, the blog post, it can be maybe, I would say in A4, 2-3 pages at max. It can't be very long, so, because it has to be readable. But of course, the catch is that you write a blog post about your report, or something related to your report, and then at the end of the blog post there is your report attached. And then you, when you have written your blog post, you put the link to social media, and then it directs traffic to your website, and then people see, this is the report. Okay, I will have a look at that. So it's just, it's a hook to get people to be interested in your research. So it's,
At the same time, they might get different expectations. It's all about something else, and then.
Yeah. This could be. Yeah. But it's
like commercials of online games. That's.
Yeah, and here are some good resources for writing a blog post as well. Okay, cool. Now we have, we're actually starting to be towards the very end. I would like you to test this, to develop a communication and interaction plan for an evaluation. Basically, using this table and this format to think about what you would communicate to whom and when. Okay, I have here the evaluation sequence. So to make a communication plan which supports your evaluation. Doesn't have to be super long, but just to get some experience on thinking about how, who would you need, who needs to know about your work at which point. I think that's the main idea. And now I see you're taking pictures. So for the task, there is the, I said evaluation assessing the effects of EU-funded community-led local development initiatives. But if you have an evaluation or something else, you can also use another example. The main idea would be to think about to draft this kind of communication plan that covers the different evaluation phases, so that when you start the evaluation, when you start collecting data, and then when you are finished with the findings. Yeah. And are you happy? Do you want to mix places, or are you happy working with your neighbors again? Yeah? I guess you have sat in the same place for 3 days and spoken to the same people for 3 days. Okay. I saw that we had 2 groups who made communication plans. Let's hear from the groups briefly. Like, what kind of plans did you make?
Yeah. We can start.
Yeah.
So just briefly, so we took the table slide, and then we put the rows like the stages of evaluation. So system phase, data collection phase, analysis and reporting, and then like an additional phase for dissemination and communication.
Yeah.
So the inception phase, at why we had like the stakeholders, a list of all stakeholders to make them to become aware of all the available data sources, and to get sure that we get involvement of all the stakeholders, so they know what's happening with the evaluation, so they can answer our emails or comments regarding the data collection. So what is the topic for inception phase? So data collection, instruments for data collection, and to inform to the stakeholders about the expectation regarding their roles and responsibilities. To whom we identify a few stakeholders for a leader initiative. The ministry, line ministries, agencies, the labs, and other stakeholders. When and how it's happening at the beginning, maybe 2-3 times. How? Through meetings, through emails, and maybe through newsletters, because there are many logs and we need to be informed about the stuff. And it's a shared personal responsibility between the evaluators and the evaluation managers. Moving on to data collection phase, which is communicating about the evaluation activities. The main purpose of this phase why is to inform about the progress of evaluation, steering and increasing the ownership of the evaluation and its processes for the stakeholders and the beneficiary of the evaluation, and to also inform them about the bottlenecks to work on those expectations regarding what they will get. So yes, what are the topics, progress, challenges, solutions, alternatives to what we initially proposed, and next steps, next activities. There's only like one main stakeholder, one member of the target audience, the ministry for who we are doing the evaluation regarding the leader. When and how we just set periodic depends on the evaluation itself, and how to progress reports, to emails, and to even ad hoc face-to-face or online meetings. And it falls under the responsibility of the evaluators to carry out all these activities. And finally, engaging stakeholders, which is at the end of which is during the analysis and reporting. The why, to present conclusions and recommendations, to validate conclusions and recommendations, and sort of to get the stakeholders on your side after you present what you found. Of course, the topic is findings, conclusions, and recommendations of the evaluation. The target audience is, as in the initial phase, the ministry, the line ministries, agencies, stakeholders, and the lot. When, how often, at the end, maybe 2-3 workshops to get everybody involved. How also to the reports that we're going to make, to maybe synthesis reports, some evaluations require that, emails, workshops, and it also falls under the responsibility of the evaluators to do so. And finally, communicating findings, what is the objective, to present conclusions and recommendations to the general public. This is done periodically using multiple methods such as press releases, printed materials, events, the web pages of the evaluator, of the ministry that conducted the evaluation, and even like networks and websites of rural networks where the labs are a member of. And it falls under the responsibility of the evaluators, the evaluation manager from the ministry, maybe a PR person from the ministry, also the managers of the rural networks that manage the networks to inform everyone involved in this type of activities.
Yes, very good, very good. Thank you. And your group, you had a slightly different way of doing this, but
basically we also constructed a timeline. So we had the beginning of the evaluation where like the main objective is just to inform people and mostly participants about the existence of the start of the evaluation. So they know that we are going to contact them throughout the evaluation. So the target audience is of course the beneficiaries, maybe field experts to service providers, and it's just like a one-time maybe an email sent out to the relevant stakeholders. So after that, we have several roles, which includes the communication throughout the evaluation about the ongoing activities of the evaluator and also the first findings and promising results during the evaluation. So we can divide it into two parts regarding the target audience, because first we have the beneficiaries and the service providers who we are contacting, and we are sending them like 1 or maybe 2-page long research reports, but also we want to send out like social media posts and in form of news, or like a newsletter for followers of the evaluators, social media, and the media platforms of the ministry maybe. And after that we have the finalization of the evaluation, where the validation workshop is really important, where we contact the beneficiaries and service providers and validate the findings, and together we are formulating recommendations in a closed workshop. And after that, the final report is going to be presented and first sent to the participants, and after that we got a final conference which will be public. So anyone who is interested or who has subscribed to the newsletter can come and we present the findings, the conclusions, and the recommendation of the evaluation. Of course, the conference, we have to advertise it to social media, we tweet about it, and it out in newsletter format. And after that, just the last, I don't know, social media post about the evaluation that it has been published to the official platforms of the ministries or this kind of websites. So yeah, briefly, that's what we got.
Yes, very good. Very good. And you can see that this is a slightly different take on similar topic. This is where I would say that you have to always you have to adjust the communication plan and the communication efforts to the evaluation itself, also in terms of the budget and the resources, but also the audience, so that this is always tailored in a way, and you can really use like as much as you want for the communication, but then you need to, in terms of budgeting, you need to be a bit careful that some clients want a lot of communications activities, some clients don't, so you need to have an eye for it. But I still would say that it is important, because this way your success rate, especially if you manage to engage the audience and engage the stakeholders early, then this will actually help you to succeed in the process. And also in the end, it will also help you to get the recommendations into use. So thank you very much. I hope that this was, I know it's 4 p.m. something, but still, I hope this was a useful exercise for you. I have just a couple of slides and then one more addition. Thanks, Mihail. Okay, so the use of results. We have always there is the idea that the evaluation results or the recommendations, that they are the most used things out of the evaluation, but actually not always. In the evaluation, you answer questions such as, first you answer the what, and then how, and then to what extent. My MA students in Iceland, they were completely shocked when I told them that the what, this is a bachelor's thesis, how is a master's thesis, and then the what extent is a PhD thesis, and we do about 10 or 11 of these a year. So it's that's why you have to be efficient in order to be able to do all the work that you have to. So in a sense, a good evaluation project, it's like a PhD. So it also means that it gathers a lot of factual background data and information that has not been collected in one place at the time. So it can be as a source of information. It can also help support the cooperation between the stakeholders better. That it can actually bring them together, because you get them to discuss about the same thing. And one important thing is that if done well, and if the staff of, for example, the ministry is involved, then they will get skills and they will get understanding. So what in the EU they always talk about is evaluation culture. So that if the evaluation is done well and the people are involved, then they actually learn to appreciate them more. So that the evaluation culture grows and the people actually expect that things are researched properly and that this becomes part of the policy cycle. So it can, yes, it can be the results, but there's also other things. In an ideal case, this is actually from, if I remember, from somewhere in the UN way of doing it, that you can have management response and follow-up. So you have the recommendation, then let's say the ministry management, they would go through the recommendations and then check whether they accept it, partially accept it or reject it, and why they would do this, and then what are they going to do about it. Then they plan their work, that we are going to, because of this recommendation, we are going to change this support type, blah, blah, blah. And then who is going to do it? How are they going to do it? When should it be completed? And when are they going to check whether they completed this? So there is actually a standard format of doing this. And I know that the UN agencies are very, they do this regularly. I used to work at the European Commission, and actually there it's part of like the annual management plan, that when you're writing the annual report, for example, for your unit or for your sector or something, and planning the next year, you always have to check what kind of evaluations were done, what were the recommendations, and what are the actions you need to do. So they are actually part of the annual management cycle there. From my own experience, that in the ministries, it depends a bit. Might not be this formalized, but some places they formalize it, some places they don't. It depends a bit. But then we get back to the evidence-based policy making, where the whole thing started from 2 days ago. So this is just the, what is evidence-based policy making, but Mariana told you about it already. So why do we need all of this management response and follow-up? Well, it's because of evaluation in the policy cycle, so that the evaluation can give information for the problem setting or definition of the agenda, or for example, modification of something. And then it helps, then it starts with the policy formation and like this. Of course, this is the ideal world. Actually, evaluation also helps here. It also helps in the implementation and monitoring. But yeah, so the idea is that the whole idea is that once you get the information, then you will use it to improve the policy. And that's how we make all of this. And this was the end of my slides. Ta-da! But I have one more thing. So I see that there's still 7 minutes left. So Mihailo said that, you didn't cover focus groups. No, I didn't. Because I consider focus groups as group interviews. So in a sense, the coding and the analysis of the focus groups would be the same as for the interviews. Of course, for focus groups, you might also want to do some of the discourse analysis, because there is a discussion between the people. How do they use the words and things like that? But yeah, I didn't separate focus groups from interviews because I consider them group interviews. But what I want to say, and this is fundamental, and this will be my final words, do not mix focus groups with a workshop. Because focus group is for getting information, and it's an information extracting tool. It's okay to have different opinions in the focus groups. It's actually really nice if they are, because then you get the whole panorama of views. In a workshop, you have a common goal. You are trying to come to a common conclusion, and you design the workflow in such a way that the people around the table agree that this is the way we should go forward. That's a workshop. The focus group is such that people can leave angry because the other ones had really stupid ideas. That's okay. That's focus group. But yeah, so focus group is really, it's for mapping the views and getting the information, and you should not try to get the people to agree. That's not focus group. But in a workshop, you are trying to work towards a common solution. So they are, the other one is like this, and the other one is more like this. I've sometimes seen it that, they call that the focus groups are actually designed as workshops, and that's when the methodology me says this is awful. So yeah. But anyway, thank you. I I have exhausted my communications and data analysis things for today. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.